I'm John Sipher.
And I'm Jerry O'Shea.
Between us, we have over 60 years of experience as clandestine officers in the CIA, serving in high-risk areas all around the world.
Part of our job was creating conspiracies, like being undercover, to deceive our adversaries.
Now, we're going to use that experience to investigate the conspiracy theories everyone's talking about, as well as some you may not have heard.
Could these be true, or are we being manipulated?
Find out now on Mission Implausible.
So people who follow election coverage certainly know our next guest is Rick Wilson. Rick's a political strategist, ad maker, writer, speaker, and commentator. I know, exactly. He's the co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and he writes for... Oh, exactly. He's a co-founder of the Lincoln Project and writes for numerous publications. He's a regular on TV and has authored 2 New York Times bestsellers and has his own podcast with Molly Jong-Fast. For our purposes, we're especially interested in his experience as a former Republican political strategist. God, what the hell's going on with that?
It's the strategic thing.
For me, I'm an ardent follower of his excellent put-down vocabulary. Like, I learned the word chode from him and wall-eyed chucklefuck. And today on Twitter, he called Trump a quivering mass of evil suet. So I'm very, very impressed with your ability to get under Trump's skin.
What have you got against suet, Rick?
Listen, I'm pro suet and I vote, but you know.
So Rick, just quick, can you talk about how political parties might use conspiracy theories to help their candidates? And did you do so when you were?
You know, it wasn't really my flavor particularly, but there's been this evolution. And I'm not going to say it's only in the Republican Party, because there are plenty of Democratic Party conspiracy theories over the years as well. But there has been this evolution as social media has convinced people that what they see online must be true. It became easier and easier to convince people that ludicrous things were actually happening behind the scenes, that they were causing them. And as we've moved away from the traditional media structure the country had for a long time, 3 television networks, and then for a while it was CNN and MSNBC and Fox, but now it's a billion Facebook pages of, the Patriotic Patriots Eagle Forum.ru, and these things that appear convincing, and you can sell people on truly dumb and dangerous and pernicious ideas. And so it's really become a centerpiece of the way that particularly the Republican Party right now prosecutes its cases. It's not enough that Kamala Harris is a liberal. She's got to be a global plant by a Marxist super state hidden away somewhere in the world, secretly run by George Soros out of the basement of a pizza restaurant, or whatever flavor of crazy you want to hit that day. They will always find a way to include it now inside the dialogue in the Republican Party. And look, as I said, I'm going to be a little bipartisan here. Democrats have occasionally gotten a little what we call blue anon, where they believe some things that are not true to be true. And it is a sign not of any failing of any one party. It's just that the methods right now that fill up the capacity of these methods is so beyond what we've ever experienced before.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of follows up what you're saying. I almost repeating it, but I get from family members. I'm one of 10 kids, so we've got sort of Trump cultists in my family, and sure. I get that you can have like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's and then start to go down a rabbit hole. But when you get they're harvesting children for adrenochrome so they can live forever. Right. It's like that gets into like fucking fantasy land, right? I mean, that's 100%. Crazier shit than even Hitler said, right? So why do people like tolerate and buy into this? When I used to love the Republican Party, parts of it in any case, and I don't get what happened to the party, right? I mean, where are the rational people like you?
They mostly got pushed out. I mean, guys like me. Well, I'll give you a good example. The first sign of a crack between me and the Republican base was back in 2008. And some reporter said to me, "What about this story? Isn't it true he was born in Kenya?" And I said to Politico, I'm like, this is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard. Well, what are you talking about? That's insanity. And they're like, no, researchers. And so I literally called my opposition research guy. I'm like, hey, do me a favor, check the hospital. There's a birth record in Hawaii. Of course there was, but all of them decided that this was true. And not the senior campaign people for McCain, but I was hanging out there because people were really angry that I was trying to blow up this great narrative they thought was going to defeat Barack Obama. And I was working hard to defeat Barack Obama at the time. But it's really tempting. It's really easy. Like you guys know from the intelligence world, you're trying to sell someone a vision of something that they can or should be. And you frame up the world in a way that makes it compelling for them to do that. And these conspiracy theories take people who are lower information voters, who are lower, sometimes, not always, but generally speaking, of lower education levels, and gives them this cohesive vision of the world that makes sense. And it gives them a way to say, oh, that's why my life sucks. That's why these people don't treat me the way I want to be treated. That's why I lost my job. And it's convenient and it's comfortable. And man, unfortunately, it leads to some very dark outcomes.
Well, I think, like you said, it's about feelings. I feel like that's true. Like even if it's not true or not. And
yeah,
so
vibes based, all vibes based.
Exactly. And I can imagine why campaigns would want to weaponize that if they could. So do you think there are strategists around Trump who see these or try to actually even create these things for their own purpose, or are they just out there and they let them go?
I think for the most part, inside the campaign, they depend on the existence of those things outside of the campaign, and they can nudge them, leverage them, nod and wink at them. I know inside the right-wing media infrastructure and the right-wing political infrastructure, there are a lot of these guys, the Jack Posobiec's, the Steve Bannons, the Dan Bongino's, the Roger Stones, the Steve Bannons. I think I repeated Steve Bannon because he's the guy so
twice
pernicious.
We're
going to name him twice. Yeah. But all those people, they're personally too smart to believe this garbage, but they do recognize how much it motivates a lot of people inside the Republican base, and they really like that.
Yeah. So Rick, you're a political strategist, not a neuroscientist, but people in their general lives, even Trump cultists, they know that like, if I don't put gas in my car, it's not going to run forever. Right. Or, if I have cancer, I might have to take chemotherapy. Right. It's like, I get that. But when it comes to their political philosophy, they throw, basic rationality out. So there's sort of this, at least in my mind, in their minds, there's this dissonance that goes on where they accept fantasy in their political world and for their political leaders and people who supposedly, they want to represent them, but they don't accept that same fantasies, with the exception perhaps of COVID. And then we could sort of talk about that as sort of an overlay, but COVID vaccines and vaccines in general, but they don't accept it in their personal lives. Right. So there's a dissonance there. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
The delta between what they like as a political technique or a political angle, and look, most people, the vaccine thing is a little bit of a crazy one because that has become something that defies a lot of categorization. But most people who say, oh, well, they control the weather, they also, if a hurricane's steaming right toward them, they're going to probably evacuate. They're not so irrational. But politics has made Americans less rational about their lives in ways that we haven't really fully reckoned with yet. I think it's been difficult for Americans, more centrist Americans, more or less politically engaged Americans, to say, wow, they really do believe in, like Hillary Clinton, a global pedophile conspiracy or whatever, all these crazy things that we all go, God, come on. There are a lot of people who are shocked what their neighbors believe. They act normal during the day, and then it'll come up at a barbecue, or the guy, somebody at a barbecue will suddenly say, like, well, what about the Illuminati and the lizard people? And it it shocks people. It bothers them, because it really does show how our culture has been sort of rebuilt around the things that make us politically and socially comfortable.
Interesting.
I want to talk a little bit about Lincoln Project. So in some ways, it seems like we're in this secret Republican civil war, right? So some people want...
It's not so secret.
Yeah, not so secret. Some people want the Republicans to be MAGA, and others want to be more akin to the traditional Republican Party. And I do personally think that there are generally two types of people in the world, right? Some value strength and security, and others value fairness and inclusion. That's why sort of two parties in all sorts of countries. So do you think we need a generally leftist party and a generally rightist party? And so what do you think's happening, and what is your role in that? What are you guys trying to do?
Sure. Well, look, I believe that one party states are always doomed. And I internationally, I think they descend into authoritarianism. And domestically, one party states descend into corruption. You look at Florida, my home state, it is one of the most lavishly corrupt places you can imagine. It's all pay to play. It is beyond what people even believe. They used to joke like, "Oh, New Orleans is the most corrupt city," and Miami's like, "Hold my mojito." No. But, and on the flip side, Florida is a very red state. On the flip side, New Jersey is basically a state run by a political mob. And so I don't see one party systems really benefiting the population, benefiting the polity, if I'm a politically nerd. And so I think we need a center left and a center right party in this country. I mean, right now I'm part of a weird coalition. It runs from Bernie Sanders and AOC to guys like me and Adam Kinzinger and Liz and Dick Cheney. If you can't find a place to live in that coalition, I don't know where you're. I don't know how I can help you. But it really is the Republican Party of today is a different creature than the traditional Republican Party, which at least aspirationally, at least on paper, believed in limited government and the rule of law and keeping the role of the state in check, and the things that would be recognizable as the traditional GOP. Those things are no longer a part of the Republican Party, because now it's about a cult. Now it's about Donald Trump and his whims and his psychological quirks and all the things that he represents are very distant from the old Reagan, Bush, Eisenhower GOP. It's just not the same. It's not the same world. And look, a lot of people very much regret that. And they've been trapped in this idea, this very false dichotomy of, it's either Trump or communism. It's either Trump or, George Soros takes over the world. And those things depend on, fantasies and conspiracies and imaginary demons that are out there. In a way that it's been a long time in our politics, or actually never in our politics, where we've seen that kind of nerve-wracking, constant, revision of history about what the party is and means. Because look, when the Republican Party was formed in 1854, it came out of the Whig Party's collapse. And it had some of the Whig Party's DNA in it, but it remained largely unaltered until 1964. So almost 100-year run. And then it sort of transformed itself from 1964 through 2015 into the sort of, pro-security, limited government, constitutional rule of law party. And now it's something very, very different. So it's only had 3 iterations. Democratic Party's had a few more iterations over the generations, but GOP has really been only about 3 things, and now it feels much different than it did when it started. I mean, even I'm not that old. I wasn't around for the first.
It's dabbling with strongmanism, authoritarianism now, right? With the cult leaders,
sure,
and so forth.
100%.
But so I wonder if you'd run with me on a thought experiment. We've done this a lot. I'm sure you have as well. I'd like to hear your take on. So let's just, for the sake of argument, Trump loses, or he has his last Big Mac. What happens to the base, and what happens to Trumpism once Trump is no longer like a viable leader? However that plays out.
Jerry, that's an absolutely fantastic question. It is a question I think about every single day. I don't think Trumpism immediately disappears. I think it has some shelf life left to run, because in part it's a product of this. It's a product of this very effective media ecosystem, and it's not just Fox. It's Facebook, and it's the Discord and Telegram and all these other channels that have become definitional to how the party indoctrinates its members and communicates with its members. Those things are still going to exist. Rupert Murdoch is going to live till he's like 400 years old, and he's going to run Fox as he runs Fox right now. He has no incentive or desire to change that. And I do think it's going to be a very long road between the end of Trump himself and the end of Trumpism. And again, the base of the party is very different from the leadership of the party. Mitch McConnell doesn't believe in any of that garbage, but he does believe in power, and he wants to keep it. And so he's going to.
Do they need a paladin? Do they need a leader? Can Trumpism survive as an ism without a leader? Different people vie for it to take control of whatever it is, like Peronism.
Terrific question, and Peronism is actually a really good analogy to it too. I think there's a real problem inherent in this whole thing, and that Trump got away with things as a celebrity that an ordinary political leader could never get away with. He got away with things as a TV personality. And I saw this in focus groups in 2015 and 2016. We were trying to beat the guy, and people were their image of Trump was locked in by 14 years of The Apprentice on TV. He's the richest man in the world. He owns all of Manhattan. He builds everything. Everything he touches turns to gold. And the entire appeal of Trump in that space came from lower middle class voters who are, legitimately pissed off about a lot of things in our culture, our society, and our economy. There was, in the beginning, it's not really as prevalent now, a sense the economic anxiety thing was real in the beginning. We had gone through the 2008 crisis. We had gone through a lot of other restructurings of our economy, and a lot of those working class folks saw him as like, he'll be the avatar of me sticking it to the man. I'm gonna use Trump as my weapon system to go after these people that treat me like crap. And for Trump, that was a great image to build. It worked like magic to persuade a lot of the people in the Republican base that he needed. Those people are dying off. The demographics of that group are quite elderly. They are on the back end of their lives, and because a lot of them are earlier boomers, and for us late boomers, the most intense feelings about Trump are with people 70 and older. They really are pissed off about a lot of things, and he really channels that for them. That will be going away. That will be changing. But that's going to take a while. That's a process, not a solution. And the other part of it is there's only one thing in politics that teaches you anything, and that's pain. Pain is the only teacher in political life. If Republicans start losing races consistently because Trumpism doesn't sell and it doesn't scale, they will change. They will not stick with a poisoned chalice for very long, but the old party's never coming back. Let's put it that way. That's a forlorn hope by a lot of my friends believe it, and I, however, have been around this block now with Trumpism for a little longer than I care to recount 9 years. Jesus Christ. And it just doesn't have the same, I don't have that sunny optimism I once had as a younger man.
Wait, is there anything you can do? I mean, obviously in 2012, the thought was, okay, we've been losing races. We need to expand the party. We need to bring in new people. Turned out that wasn't what happened, right? Trump came along and it went the opposite way. Is there anything that people like you or like-minded that can do to, you can't recreate it, but do you have to destroy it, the village, in order to save it? What do you got to do?
I think the village is doing a pretty good job destroying itself right now. I mean, there is a feeling sometimes it feels like a suicide pact sometimes in the GOP, that you look at these people who do things they know are politically destructive. Mitch McConnell right now could come out of the Senate race this year with a 5 or 6 seat majority, but Donald Trump got to pick all of the nominees. And the base got to pick all of the nominees, except one guy, Dave McCormick, who just had so much money he could do what he wanted. He is unlikely to do that. He may get the majority, barely get the majority, but this is not an easy skate for McConnell. It's not going to be an easy win. And the reason it's not going to be easy is because in these swing states in particular, Trumpism does not sell and it does not scale.
Yeah, so Trumpism is built on a lot of things, and central to it, I think, are a set of conspiracy theories, or at least I think misconceptions about how the world works and government works. But and that to a certain extent, okay, you're selling a product. I get that, but when you look at some of where these conspiracy theories go, when you take it to Ultima Thule, it leads to violence, or can lead to violence. We saw that on this.
Yes.
So if you
January
claim
6th, a perfect
elections
example.
are no longer valid, exactly. If you claim elections are not the way to settle our political differences, there's really nothing left but violence as an obvious answer. So, Rick, I was just sort of wondering what your sense is not so Trumpism, but where do we go in, within the American polity of actually starting to kill each other, right? I mean, which is sort of an obvious conclusion if we hopefully we never go there, but that's where some of these things lead.
Yeah,
and it's not a both-siders. Only one side is doing this.
No, there is only one side that believes that. And look, we saw this weekend down in, or at a rally this weekend, the Rod of Iron rally, which combines Christian nationalism and gun fetishism, and fun at parties. And they were talking this weekend, a guy named Ivan Rylkin, who calls himself Trump's Secretary of Retribution. They're talking about, when does the reign of fire begin? When do we get to start killing the liberal shills? When do we get to, take our vengeance on the people that have tried to hurt Trump? And, the problem with rhetoric like that, and the problem with folks like that, is if they're denied the ability to do that, if they're told, no, this is out of bounds, and they still feel frustrated, and their leaders still tell them, oh, well, the other reason you can't do this is because those liberal elites don't want you to have power, they will start seeking that out. And we saw it on January 6th. We've seen the outliers of it with the Omar Sayok. We saw it with the Tree of Life synagogue attack. We saw it with the Walmart attack, where you've got these young kids who become politically involved in the alt-right, and they go out and they shoot people up because they believe that white people are being replaced, or globalism is causing, the America to fall apart. All of it is based on lies and conspiracies. But for people who are not educated and worldly and paying attention, cults have always been able to capture young men, particularly, and activate them for violence. And this behaves like a cult in a lot of ways.
In the 1960s, of course, it was the left that was doing this, right? I mean, the Weathermen and bombings and so forth. And now this time it's primarily the right.
Yeah, I mean, look, the evolution of the Republican Party, look, we've seen the parties go through various phases like that. But all of this is juiced by the existence now of social media, of these online platforms, and from TikTok to Twitch to Discord to Telegram to God knows what else is out there. Those things reduce the friction of the activation of extremists. And they feed them a curated version of the world that lets those extremists feel like they're on a mission, that they're doing the right thing, that without them playing the role that they're the people handling them want them to play, that the world will end. It's a very dangerous and pernicious space. I worry a lot about our ability as a society and a country to manage that risk.
Yeah, and John or Jerry and I are both on Ivan Ranklin's list, and I'm sure you are as well. And so it's really troubling. And part of what's Jerry and I lived, around the world. We lived for 30 some years overseas doing kind of things. And there are countries where there's incredible poverty, incredible civil war, incredible oppression. But here we are the richest, most powerful country in the history of the world. Our economy is the best going on in the world 100%. Right now, better than China, better than everybody else. People aren't starving, but people are so angry they're willing to burn it down. Like, I don't get that piece of it.
That is again, that is where I think the social media matrix grabs these people and will not let them go. And it tells them that we've reached the final extremity. Everything is falling apart. The elites are so powerful, except you, soldier of God, can go activate yourself and strike a blow against the people that are trying to poison our blood and soil, which of course sounds better in the original German, but these techniques aren't new. The irony is that they're, as you point out, they're happening in a country that is profoundly wealthy, where we have the highest standard of living in the history of mankind, and yet people are told, that their lives are a paragon of misery. It is a really tough problem.
Blut und Boden. I had to learn German for years. Yep. Hey, I went to German university. It does sound good in German. But I want, as foreign, as former agency guys, Russia. So it's not just that we are coming up with these conspiracy theories ourselves. I think we are coming up mostly with them, but they're being amplified by our adversaries as a societal weakness. And mostly Russia, but Iran, China, and so forth. And
China.
And right. So you are a message guy, right? Your whole thing is how to get to people, how to get through, not to get to them, and then get through to them. And I'm wondering, you're also seeing what the Russians are doing. Just to name one example, what grade would you give them? Would you give them a, or what advice would you give them? I don't think they're coming up with these conspiracy theories. They're amplifying them mostly now. But sort of how would you parse them out?
Yeah. Look, mostly I think I would say they are actually quite improved from 2016. A lot of the stuff in 2016 was a little too lurid, a little too over the top, a little too provably fucked up. And now it feels like they're finding social divisions that they can exploit much more effectively, because a lot of the stuff they're exploiting is real. And remember, they're not just trying to divide. They're not just trying to tell Republicans, hey, you're being taken advantage of by liberals or whatever. They're also targeting Black communities they're saying the Americans hate you. The police want to kill you. Why do you put up with this? They're also targeting Hispanics now, saying, that America wants to deport you. They hate you. Why do they disrespect you? They talk to them in the languages of their cultures. I think they've gotten better at it. Some of it's still pretty, crude, but it's just because it's crude doesn't mean it doesn't work. And that concerns me. That concerns me tremendously, that we don't have a grasp of the scope of the problem. We know it's big, but I still don't think we understand, the the size of what they used to call in the 50s intelligence world the mighty wurlitzer, and that idea that we don't know how much we don't know what we don't know about Russia, that should scare the crap out of people. That should bother people. There are things about their communications apparatus that we don't understand the scale of or how they're targeting. And we've got some evidence of how they did it post hoc from 2016 and 2020, but not a ton, and not as much as I'd like to know to be able to build a sort of profile of how to punch back on it and how to push back on it. Because again, yeah, as a communicator, as a message guy, I can write a lot of smart, beautiful messaging, but I don't know that I'm hitting the targets with the ability to have a countervailing impact for what the bad guys from overseas are doing.
Speaking of punching back, from your past world working as a strategist, why did Democrats seem so poor at developing their own effective avenues of attack? And then the follow-up is that, do you think the Harris campaign is showing discipline? Are they doing what you'd want them to do?
They are doing what I thought would be the correct approach in this. They are quite assertively not taking Trump's bait. They are in fact laying down bait of their own, and he's taking it over and over again, which I think is unique for my lifetime. We have not seen that level of commitment by the Democrats to fighting the real fight. They the number one thing a Democratic campaign would have done, prior to Biden, I think prior to Trump, their first thing is like, we're going to set up a big policy team. We're going to write this policy. We're going to talk about all these things that are going to help us sell to America. And they didn't understand that elections in this country aren't about policy. They're about personality and culture and connection. And I think she's doing a much better job of being someone Americans relate to and understand, of being someone Americans like. Those things are not trivial in a national campaign. And I have to salute her for that, for very smartly handling a lot of the aspects that could have been a negative for her campaign if they'd followed the old rule book.
Yeah, I want to congratulate you, encomiums. So I have to say, some of the most effective messaging out there that I've seen just watching it is the stuff from the Lincoln Project, right? It's punchy. In fact, when I watch these things, it's sort of like, the old Batman comic books, it's like, pow, zowie, sort of like the air bubble that comes, the speech bubble that comes around it.
Sure.
Yet you seem to say things like the Democrats don't dare, right? And you watch them and go, yeah, that's true, but no one dares to say it. So I was wondering, what's what's the mission of the Lincoln Project, and where does it go once the election ends? It's great. I love it.
Well, sadly, I think we're going to end up with 76 days between the election and certification that are as risky as anything we've ever faced in this country. And I wish I could tell everybody it's all going to be fine. But we watched January 6th happen, and I watched what they did last time. And this time they have actual lawyers, not the Four Seasons Total Landscaping jokers. They have real attorneys now, and that should scare the shit out of people. That is not a great place to be right now. And one of the things we're useful as is, somebody analogized this once. So they're like, you guys are like a SEAL team. You're assholes, but sometimes we need a specific kind of asshole to blow something up behind enemy lines or do something horrible. And I was like, yeah, I'll take it. We're not the big army. We're not there to rebuild the cities. We're not there to do all the traditional stuff. But we are, we have a set of skills to pull over some of these Republican voters and convince them, and some of these independent leaning conservatives and convince them that, that the system that they've been playing in is not a healthy one. So that's sort of where our goal is to defeat Trump and Trumpism and preserve the Republic. I know that sounds kind of highfalutin, but it has the advantage or disadvantage of being true. We really believe the country's in quite grave peril. And so what happens after he's defeated? First off, I owe my publisher 2 books, so I gotta do some actual work. But look, we'll see where it goes. I mean, but I think the preservation of democracy and a constitutional republic, it's kind of a big deal, because everything falls apart without that. Nothing works without having the institutional and political infrastructure of an actual republic. You can't pretend that in Russia people are billionaires because they worked hard. They're billionaires because they played the ball game and Putin gave them their money, or made them part of his crime family. That there are no situations and circumstances where authoritarian regimes allow free markets or free individual expression or individual liberty or free expression. So, we see this risk is going to last for some period of time. I don't know how long. I would prefer it not be the rest of my life. I'd like to be done with this mission at some point. I've been on it for 9 years. And I don't know how long you guys would spend undercover, but you reach a point where you're just like, my God, I'm exhausted.
So you're a political commando is what you're saying.
It's an analogy for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys are incredibly effective at trolling him. I know George Conway's doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and it seems to work. But then there's the next step of actually, I think you're trying to get people at the margins. That's what politics is about.
Mm-hmm.
But the future is about actually changing the minds of those people who are caught deep in this thing. And
it is.
You brought up a thing that's really important. Is Jerry and I grew up through institutions. We were professional public servants, and I don't think Americans have forgotten, from 150 years ago, what the U.S. government was like. It was like these foreign governments where it's pay to play, and you had to pay for things, and corruption, and series of reforms over the years has created a system where they call it the deep state as a negative thing, but for most of the stuff, these institutions are professional. People take it seriously.
Absolutely.
They are working on behalf of the state. They're trying to follow the rule of law, and the notion that you should just throw these things away and life is going to be good. I think a lot of people, if they get their way, are going to be really sad.
I think they would be shocked and appalled and horrified at what the world looks like if you end up, if the Republican Party becomes the Ba'ath Party, and I mean, think about it. You had Saddam. He ran for election every couple of years and got 117% of the vote or whatever it was, and people would say, oh, well, they do have elections there. I mean, it may not be free, but that's not the world people in America, I think, could ever truly adjust to. I think it would be much more difficult than they believe to live in a world like that. And God knows I don't want to live in a world like that. That's the last thing I want to see for this country.
Yeah, Rick, I want to run with a really bad Star Wars analogy. So I picture you as like Luke Skywalker,
I'm here for it.
Right? Yeah. And of course, Darth Vader would be Roger Stone, right? You're sort of in the same world, but one is like, really practices the dark arts. And I was wondering, if you're standing across from Roger with a lightsaber, what would the dialogue go? What would you talk to Roger Stone about? He's like your evil twin in a lot of ways, or Rick,
Roger's from a generation, actually almost 2 generations prior to me in politics. But one thing I learned very quickly in politics was that Roger Stone is 95% bullshit about Roger Stone. He's rarely actually involved in big races or big consequential issues. He's an evil piece of shit. He's a degenerate fop. He's a weirdo. And
with a bad tattoo.
Bad act. Yes, bad tattoo. Bad actor, bad tattoo, bad guy. But he has lived off of like one small bore scam after another his entire career. And he never got big races and consequential assignments because he's just full of shit. I mean, and look, everybody in politics has a bullshitting gene in their body. Everybody in professional politics can bullshit, but Roger is just bullshit. and people always ask me, like, he says these things about you. Why don't you fight with him? I'm like, because I don't give a fuck. Because Roger is inconsequential to me. And you know, in politics, a lot of times that you see people who build up a legend, who build up their cover story about who they are. And Roger Stone tells people, oh, I elected Nixon. Roger Stone was a fucking intern for Nixon in 72. He was a sign boy in Connecticut. He wasn't like a key player. He like glommed on the Nixon much later in Nixon's life. And it's just like, I don't take people like that seriously because, you know, I come from a group and a world and a cohort of like people who are serious fucking guys. I don't look at people like Roger as somebody that I'm scared of, or I don't even think of him as like a serious person. He's good at threatening people. He plays his little like fuck around games from time to time with people. And look, is that a superpower? Yeah, maybe, but it's not one I particularly respect.
No, but that's the danger. Is MAGAism has empowered these kind of people. So this view that your enemy, your real enemy, not just your political enemy, is the other party, other American parties. Therefore, Russians are your friends because they're helping you against your real enemy. So if you have no soul and no values, someone like Roger can be the go-between between Russians, go-between between the Proud Boys, between these very dangerous people. And then when the President of the United States pardons him and has immunity now from the Supreme Court, is as stupid and awful as he is, he could be a real nasty weapon.
100%. Look, I think of Steve Bannon as more of a threat because he's an organized psychopath, and Roger's a disorganized psychopath. But yeah, the idea that these guys have in their heads is that the things they couldn't earn in this world, they're going to take because they're going to be part of it's like a Middle Eastern satrap in the 1700s. They're gonna be with the guy, and they're gonna be his viziers and his advisors, and they'll make a world on the back of having, you know, the ear of the king. Look, that still happens in this world. But there's also the good guys have another benefit in this fight. These guys are the most corrupt and backstabbing bunch of people you'll ever meet. Sure, they may hate all of us who believe in democracy and freedom, but they hate each other more. It's fantastic.
That's the skills to get them to, well, that's what the Russians are trying to do, is get us to fight each other.
Sure.
If we can then use those skills to get them to fight each other inside MAGA world. Maybe that's, you know, the best.
You know, I just before the Ukraine war really got hot, actually the day after they invaded, I ran an ad. We ran an ad on Sputnik, and we put it up in Moscow on a couple of digital platforms. It got taken down almost immediately, but it was in Russian, and it was asking women in Russia, "Are you going to send your young man to die for this old man?" And we got a friend of ours from y'all's former world who was like, "Please be fucking careful; they'll kill you."
Luckily, they have a lot of enemies before they get to you, but you're low on the list.
That's the upside. I feel like I've got a pretty good chance of surviving on that front. They're not gonna Novichok me right away.
Right.
It's expensive stuff to use.
Right.
It is. But it sends a message. Back to the Lincoln Project. You've gotten a lot of headlines just off of what you're saying and how you say it and some of the messages in there. And I was wondering, do you have like a greatest hits, or like the top one or two that the audience could go look at, or
wow,
it's sort of like, what's your favorite Gilligan's Island show, right? Which is your, or the, what's your favorite?
Yeah.
I'm old. Okay. What's your favorite Star Trek episode? What's your favorite one? Which most?
Look, I mean, here's the problem with this. I've made something like 700 ads in the last 5 years. And there are some absolute home runs that I think are super effective and that also have an emotional place for me personally that spoke to me. There's an ad at the very end of the campaign in 20, called One Day. Martin Sheen narrates. It's a final motivation ad. You got to get out and vote. There's an ad called Girl in the Mirror. There's an ad called Boys. There is an ad called Fellow Traveler that talked about Trump and Russia. We had a series of ads about COVID that are heartbreakers. This year, we've had some stuff that I think an ad we just released the other day called Daisy, named after the famous ad, but it's a story about a girl who can't get care when she's pregnant, and it runs backward from her death to her birth, and talks about why her father did this, chose Trump over her. But we've got the Lincoln Project YouTube channel has it's a rabbit hole that even I go into sometimes and go, I forgot I made that ad. We've reached the point now where our team's like, hey, we need to do something with this demographic or that group, and I'll say occasionally like June 2020, third week, go find it, and some of it is stuff that sadly we're having to recapitulate a second time here, in a fight with this guy for the second go round, but things hold up.
Yeah, almost as many as Simpson.
We don't
episodes,
obviously
right?
keep it too long. I don't think we don't keep it too long. You're busy fighting the good fight, and it's going to be very brutal going forward. So, just using your political sense of having been in this field for a long time, what do you think about November? What do you think's happening?
I think she's going to win. I don't think it's going to be a huge win. I'm going to equivocate a little bit. There are three scenarios for November. She's going to win by a little. She's going to win by a absolute landslide wipeout, which tells me that the polling is as wrong as we think it is. Or he's going to surprise us in 3 or 4 states that we don't see coming. I think that's the lowest probability. I think a win is the highest. I think a big win is a higher probability than Trump winning. But again, as I said, my concern is not November 5th. It's the 76 days between November 5th and certification. That's where the world, I think, gets scary and weird and dangerous.
So you're going to have
to keep right,
because
I agree with you. Yeah.
They're going to have to carry me out feet first on this one, apparently.
I was just going to say, we often, we hear these shows, I say it's a privilege and a pleasure, but with you, it really is a privilege. I watched your stuff and, I wouldn't say fan of anybody, but I really think a lot, and you're an impressive guy doing impressive work. So I really,
thank you so much.